So listen to this. In 2015, 3rd Division Coventry City put out one of the strangest transfer announcements of all time. They literally tweeted, "Welcome to Coventry City, Joe Cole." Yes, the actual Joe Cole, seriously, Joe Cole, the real Joe Cole. If you're too young to understand the excitement, let me remind you that 9 years earlier, he had Galvão Bueno, easily the most famous Brazilian commentator of all time, fawning over him mid-game, claiming that Beckham is fame, Lampard is fame, but it is Joe Cole who really plays ball. You could swear this guy was South American. Even worse, 9 years before that, at 15 years old, he had every British newspaper claiming that he was already being paid more than the country's own prime minister. This guy was a generational talent, the most Brazilian English player ever, if that makes sense. But it was also the blueprint, the original English Wonderkid, and so he was subject to every mistake in the book. Listen, just to make his story that much more unbelievable, he didn't even step into an academy until his teens. In his own words, "My dad isn't a football man, he didn't even know I could play." So much so that once a West Ham scout brought out Redknapp to watch some 12-year-old play Sunday League football, all he had to say was, "Bloody hell, where's his dad?" But still, only a couple years later, he already had a kid coming up for training with the first team, and according to club captain Steve Lomas, he had no fear whatsoever. They would put him up practicing one-on-ones with Neil Razor Ruddock. Keep in mind, this is a guy who was voted as one of the hardest footballers of all time, yet Joe would run the legs off of him. It was so good, the senior players nicknamed him the Conjurer, and soon the whole country knew about him. And though Cole claims the rumors that he was already making £5,000 a week at 15 weren't really true, claiming he actually hated that they made up that lie, that from the day that became public knowledge, even his teachers became better about it, making sarcastic comments in the middle of the classroom. As Redknapp would admit, if he had come into my office and said, "I want 30 grand a week or I'll leave," I can tell you now, I would have given it to him. After all, this was a kid who was brought into England's youth setup in a match against Spain and scored 7 goals as they beat them 8-1. No one in the country had ever seen anything like that. Even Sir Alex Ferguson was so excited about his child prodigy that Redknapp claims he asked him about him every time they met, eventually going all in and offering West Ham £10 million for his 16-year-old. If that sounds absurd in today's market, let me remind you that back then, the only Premier League transfer to surpass that amount had been that of Alan Shearer, which just happened to be the world record as well. Even R9 to Barcelona had been cheaper. Yet, no matter how hard Fergie tried, sending him United jerseys with his name on them, inviting him over to meet the team and watch the FA Cup final in their presidential suite, Cole never budged. He was an actual child and already being brought in by both Glenn Hoddle and Kevin Keegan into England's training sessions, playing among Shearer and Gascoigne before he even made his club debut. In fact, the day West Ham finally got him to put pen to paper, they got the kid to sign the contract in the actual pitch and announced to the crowd that one day you'll tell your grandchildren about this. So yeah, shortly after turning 17, he was already making his debut playing alongside Ian Wright, but though 8 appearances followed that season, it was in the FA Youth Cup that he made history. The day of the final, there was so much hype around him that kickoff had to be delayed, with the stadium staff being forced to open an extra stand as they were caught off guard by the largest crowd they'd ever seen, and Cole made sure to reward the fans for their support, bringing West Ham their first trophy in 18 years and doing it in style, with a 9-0 win, to this day the biggest demolition in the competition's history by a mile. Not to mention that he did it with enough ease that at one point he scooped the ball over 2 players and hit a half-volley Rabona to play striker through. No matter what, then, still 17, he went into his second season by joining the first team in their run towards the Intertoto Cup title, leading them to the UEFA Cup for the first time in their history, as Keegan's constant praise of him led to rumors that he could be brought into the national team in time for the Euro 2000, which already led us to some cold hard foreshadowing, as Cole would confess that "my biggest fear is not fulfilling my potential. It seems everyone's got an opinion on how far I can go." Or, as The Guardian wrote, in England the thinking goes, we have a skillful player finally, therefore he must be the most skillful player in the world. So, inevitably, next year, even with new manager Eriksson coming in, he was already being forced into his debut, and a year after that, he was playing at the World Cup. However, by his 5th season, with David James on goal, Michael Carrick in midfield and Defoe and Di Canio up front alongside him, there was so much hope around West Ham, they skipped the summer transfer market without spending a single pound, but then the injuries hit. It took them 7 games to get their first win, and after about a month of decent results, they went 15 before they won another. By December, they were at the bottom of the table, a position from which not a single team had ever survived from, and to make things worse, then Di Canio, their captain and star player, lost his head as per usual, getting into a row with the manager and then getting dropped from the team, leaving 21-year-old Joe Cole to be made the literal captain of an already sinking ship. Les Ferdinand arrived over winter, Glenn Johnson was brought into the team as well, but though from February onwards, Cole somehow managed to steer them towards 11 games with only 1 defeat, which came precisely 2 days after their manager was forced to step down following a brain tumor diagnosis. Their draw in the final game of the season confirmed their demise and their title of maybe the best ever team to get relegated, as virtually every one of those players got poached by the Big Six, with Cole, of course, the club's player of the year, being snapped up by Roman Abramovich as one of the first signings of his Russian revolution, being labeled by Ranieri as Gianfranco Zola's replacement. No pressure. Obviously, things didn't go well. Cole was almost immediately reduced to substitute cameos as he was stamped with the label of show pony, almost as if his skills weren't the reason they signed him, and by the end of the season, Ranieri actually considered loan offers from the likes of CSKA Moscow and Everton, scaring Cole to the point he admitted that it certainly crossed my mind I wasn't gonna make it at Chelsea. Regardless, despite his stock falling to the point he didn't even get a single minute at the Euros, then Mourinho came, and it was much different. I'd even say this was the moment that shaped his whole career. After all, much has been said about their relationship. Some believe Mourinho's tactical iron fist beat the flair out of Cole, shaping him into yet another tool in his box, while others claim he owes his greatest years to Mourinho as he was the kind of player who could only hit top form when tamed by his manager like a Mustang. But one thing is sure, Mourinho was really hard on him. I mean, this guy came in to score the winner against Liverpool, and when asked about it, Mourinho said that, sure, he scored, but after the goal his game was finished. I needed 11 players but only had 10. Joe has 2 faces, one is beautiful and the other I don't like. Any slight disobedience from Cole meant a place on the bench was guaranteed the following match, and though that led some to claim that Mourinho was forcing an artist to paint with boxing gloves on, it was clearly working in his favor. After that forgettable debut season, by March, Cole was scoring screamers and being named the league's player of the month, as Mourinho waved away any credit, insisting that if Joe is succeeding now, it is because he was always open to be criticized. And soon, with an assist against Barcelona in one of his best ever performances, being followed by another 2 against Bayern as well as a goal, Cole himself admitted that after we got beaten at the Camp Nou, Mourinho went through us one by one, absolutely crucifying everyone, but then he came to me, and as I thought he'd do me with a left hook, he said, You did okay. One thing this guy always was honest, and if in that first season he was able to put a Premier League medal around Cole's neck, the next, he made him even better. Though hard to pinpoint exactly, many would claim the 05-06 season saw Cole's best ever form, and I can see why. Having already scored important goals against Arsenal and Liverpool, as Bailey himself claimed he was the only English player who'd have a place in the Brazilian national team, he'd make sure to prove him right, showing up to the title decider against United and not only assisting 1, but scoring a wonderful solo goal to clutch their 2nd league title in a row, making it into the league's team of the year as the national team manager campaigned for him to be named the actual player of the year, naturally bringing him into the World Cup where 2 games in, it put up simply the performance of a lifetime. Opening the scoreboard with one of the greatest goals in football history and then securing the draw with an inch-perfect cross. That performance was the cherry on the cake take that allowed him to secure a Ballon d'Or nomination, even though he'd be out on the sidelines for 4 months after fracturing his foot in November. And actually, despite that injury lasting long enough that by the time he was fully back, Abramovich and Mourinho had decided there was only enough space in London for one of the two, leading to the latter's departure. Cole gave it all, trying to keep Chelsea on track, putting down easily his most consistent season, taking the club's Player of the Year award and hitting 19 goal contributions, only to lose the League Cup final in extra time, lose the league title over 2 points following a last day draw to Birmingham, and lose out on the Champions League final after being subbed off in extra time for Anelka, who'd missed a penalty that would hand the title to United. Meaning, in the end, it all ended up being forgotten, even though that should have been his season, especially given what happened next. In January, Cole was brought into an FA Cup match against third-tier Southend United. It should have been one of the most unremarkable games of the year, but in the other team was Anthony Grant, a former Chelsea Academy graduate that had just been let go, and maybe trying to prove them wrong, he went in too hard and snapped his ACL. 8 more months on the sidelines followed, and again, by the time he was back, the manager had been replaced and Ancelotti had moved on without Cole, and though somehow he still managed to show up in their match against United, scoring a backheel goal to get a 2-1 win, allowing Chelsea to leapfrog them towards the title, it wasn't enough. His contract was not renewed, and just like that, he was heading into a World Cup despite being a free agent, much thanks to John Terry leading a mutiny against club and country, claiming Joe is one of the best players in the country. It still amazes me how the club have come to the conclusion of letting him go, and indeed, as Liverpool beat interest from Lazio, AC Milan, Arsenal and Tottenham to secure his signing, it was incredible how much hype there was surrounding a player that had just been discarded by his own club. He had his ex-teammate Arjen Robben saying that there will be no better front three in Europe than Torres, Cole and Gerrard, while Gerrard himself absurdly claimed that Messi can do some amazing things, but anything he can do, Joe can do as well, if not better. I really fancy Joe for Player of the Year, when really, he didn't get so much as Player of the Month, not even a single Man of the Match. Finally playing in his preferred position behind a striker rather than on the wing, Cole seemed sure this move was the one, but instead, on his league debut he got sent off. The next match he missed a penalty, and faster than it ever seemed possible, Hodgson was claiming that Cole was a board signing just as the club went into new ownership. Then, in a flash, Hodgson himself was out, Kenny Dalglish was in, and just like that, they were already looking for a way to get rid of Joe Cole. Thankfully, despite their sporting director's insistence that Rudi Garcia was mad, somehow a loan to Lille was reached, making Cole the first English player in France since Chris Waddle 22 years before him, with the newspapers claiming Cole only went for it since Lille was an 80-minute commute away from London in the Eurostar, supposedly allowing him to live in England while playing abroad, though obviously that was not true. Not only did he move to France, he fully immersed himself in their culture, and in that transformative year when Nasser Al-Khelaifi took over PSG and then Ligue A altogether, he became a hero for the club. Pairing up with Hazard and Payet in their quest to revalidate Lille's title for the first time in their history, instantly taking on 5 players in a solo run on his debut match to get his first assist, setting the stage for a season full of magic moments that not only brought him his first ever hat-trick, but had Lille fighting Giroud's Montpellier for the right to become the last club to take the league title from PSG, and they might have actually done it had it not been for a few frustrating injuries and winter market sales. So by the end of the season, there was no doubt everyone wanted Cole at the club, and so did he. But instead, Brendan Rodgers blocked the deal, insisting on his return, and what happened was simple. Cole came back, played 23 minutes, went out with a hamstring injury, and by November, Rodgers was already acting like it hadn't been him who brought him back, complaining about his astronomical wages to the media, breaking all relations with the player before proposing a loan out to Spartak Moscow, and eventually choosing to pay him £3 million to terminate his contract rather than keep him around, killing his momentum completely completely just as he finally had found a safe haven away from a country that, despite being his home, never truly understood him. In the end, despite an offer from Spurs, he ended up going back to West Ham since it felt a bit mercenary, but, well, Sam Allardyce was in command there, and as one newspaper wrote, you couldn't think of less of a Big Sam player if you tried, so it was doomed. After 19 starts in 2 years, he was being labelled the forgotten man of the Premier League and being released as he insisted he'd like to stay, eventually ending up at Villa where, on his debut, he was defeated by a third-tier club, quickly becoming a backup to Benteke, before being benched completely as they made it to the FA Cup final, despite being one of the few players in the squad with actual big game experience, ultimately starting to look more and more like a bitter old man, making comments about how football keeps producing more and more tactical robots while everyone forgets the game is actually about the ball, just as he got loaned out to Coventry in the third tier for what was left of the season, eventually moving out to the MLS in search of some peace, scoring some bicycle kicks and taking Player of the Year nominations before becoming a player manager, leaving a lot of fans to think that he was just born in the wrong country.